It's finally here, the Ford Explorer. We've waited a long time to drive this. After its initial launch, which seems like an age ago now, Ford decided to delay the introduction by the best part of a year, but it doesn't matter because now we've finally got our hands on Ford's latest electric car. It's going to come in two different versions. First of all, there's going to be this single motor rear wheel drive version, and there's also going to be a dual motor all-wheel drive, which will have a slightly larger capacity battery. Now, I want to talk about batteries for a moment because this car is built on the Volkswagen Group's modular MEB platform. So the underpinnings of this car are effectively the same as what you're going to have in things like Volkswagen ID.4, ID.5, Skoda Enyaq. But Ford then does a little bit of tuning in terms of the suspension setup, and obviously the whole design is different. There's only a couple of carryover items. But this is a little bit smaller, a little bit shorter than an ID.4 in terms of overall size, although the wheelbase itself is largely the same. It's really just at either end, there's a little bit of a size difference. The design, I'm going to put my cards on the table here. I like the design. I think it looks good. It's a good mixture of that kind of rugged design without being overly offensive looking. There's a lot of soft edges, there's a lot of soft lines. The headlights are nice. Obviously, being electric means it's all fully enclosed on the front here. There's only a little bit of intake vents on the bottom. You've got the Explorer name all the way across, and of course, that big Ford logo. Now, there's no frunk as such under here. It's just some of the gubbins for the powertrain, but you do get a relatively decent sized boot, and I'll show you that in a moment. Around the side of the car then, you've got pretty nice alloy wheel designs. There's a number of different ones available. These are the 20-inch ones. They suit the car well. It does sit quite nicely. You've got a fairly straight roof all the way back as well, so you're not into this kind of coupe-like roof line or anything like that. It's nice and spacious inside, and you've got this kind of graphic here on the side. Again, breaks it up, it gives it that floating roof line. And then around the back, you've got the Explorer name, again, all the way across in this black bar, which joins the rear lights. You've got the Ford logo there. A little bit of detailing here in silver on the bottom, just to break it up a little bit, give it a bit of a diffuser look. You've got a wiper on the back, and you've got a 490-litre boot. Now, that's not as big as some of the competition. It is still a decent size, though. Relatively flat. There's only a small little lip here. You can lift that up. You've got extra storage underneath there as well. And obviously you've got a 60-40 split on the rear seats. So if you do need more space, you can fold that down, and a little room in here to have your charging cable tucked away as well. Not bad. And again, electrically operated too, so quite handy. The interior of the Explorer is, well, it's actually pretty nicely laid out. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about the design first of all. So you do have quite a decluttered kind of appearance. Obviously, the screens are a big part of what it is, so we'll go through bit by bit what it's like inside. Start off with the driving position. It's quite comfortable. Seats have a lot of adjustment. They're nice. They're not overly sporty seats, so you do have a little bit of a side bolster here. You can see it on this passenger seat, but it's not like digging in or anything like that. They are quite comfy, so doing long distances isn't going to be much of an issue. And you do sit up nice and high. I like that you can sort of see the edge of the bonnet as well. When you're looking out, you can see the tops of the wings, so it's very easy to position this car. You don't have a massively thick A-pillar here as well. You also then have pretty decent size door mirrors too. Steering wheel. Okay, first of all, there's quite a good amount of adjustment here. So reach and rake in and out. You've got a good field of movement there. So again, quite easy to find a comfortable driving position. And Ford has given the Explorer this kind of squared circular steering wheel. It seems round steering wheels are a thing of the past. So they give it this kind of flattish bottom, flattish top, and inside you have these haptic pads on either side. So you don't get physical buttons on the steering wheel. Instead, you get these touch sensitive panels, and they're okay to use, but it's very easy. For example, you have a heated steering wheel control, which is just on the same bit as the right arrow for going through the different menu systems. So it's very easy to inadvertently switch on your heated steering wheel, for example. I do wish we just had physical buttons for these things, but this is the world we live in now, and this is what Ford has decided to go with. The digital display in front of the driver is relatively small, but it's very concise. All the information is there. You can see your speed, you can see all the relevant information for your drive, and you can always see how much range you have left and your battery's state of charge. There is also an optional head-up display as well, so you can have a color head-up display in front of you. Again, it's basic, it's not as big and as detailed as the augmented reality display that Volkswagen offers. This is a smaller unit, but it does the job. Look, you're not here to watch movies, it's there just to show you all the relevant information. You do get some Volkswagen switchgear. People are going to want to know, like, what's different, what's Ford, what's not Ford. You get Volkswagen switchgear here for the drive selector. So on the right side, you can simply twist this forward for drive, twist it back to you for reverse. You also have a battery function as well, but you don't get paddles on the back of the steering wheel for adjusting the regen, which I think is a bit of a missed opportunity. And then to select your parking brake, it's just on the edge there. On the other side, you have all your lights, your indicators, your wipers are all on this right stalk, but you do have a haptic panel ahead of that on the dashboard for going through your light panels or your light functions as well. Same with the door here, you get the same kind of haptic control as what Volkswagen uses. It's not a nice system to use, and you have this quite fiddly little dial for switching between left and right mirrors, for example, and folding your mirrors. It's okay, you're probably not going to use it a whole lot, but it is there. What is more interesting about the design is you've got this large portrait style 14-inch display. It does look quite good, it's nicely angled. Ford's sync system does work quite well actually, so you've got a lot of different functionality. It's relatively intuitive to use as well. You can also have all the usual stuff. You can obviously set all your charging, all that kind of stuff. You've got ambient lighting functions, but you can also then have all of your own apps. You've got smartphone mirroring as well, so you can do all that. You can change these widgets up on the top as well. So if you want to have, you know, a certain settings that you're always going to use, you can have all those there too. So it is quite a nice system, reacts, as I said, very quickly to all your inputs. You don't get any physical controls for the temperature settings, which is always a bugbear for us, but they are always displayed on the bottom, so you can always see where they are. And again, you can just use that for you or the passenger at the front. And you've also got all your heated seats, your climate controls, everything is always displayed on the bottom regardless of what's going on up here, whether it's your nav or your media or anything like that. Probably the real trick with this screen is that you can adjust it. So it's on this kind of haptic control here, so as you press that in, that releases it, and you can set this to a number of different angles depending on what you want. Now this serves a couple of different purposes. Obviously, you can have a preference because you want to maybe have it quite upright. It does open up a whole other storage space here as well. So that is quite useful. There is quite a lot of storage inside this car. So those who like practical features are going to be a fan of this car. In there, you've got your USB-C ports. You've got quite a large amount of storage, but you can, when you slide that back down, this does lock. So when you lock the car, this is also locked. So effectively what you have is a kind of secure locker area inside here. So you could put any sort of valuables you have, your wallet, anything like that. You could leave it in there and then close that down and it's out of sight. Nobody can see what's in there. So I do quite like that. It's a bit of a different take. Rather than just taking a screen, fixing it on, they've done a little bit something different with it. And I do admire Ford for doing that. So thank you. Below that, you have another haptic control here for your volume. So it's like a touch bar, you can slide it up and down. You can also select your parking cameras as well. And you've got an off button as well. You do have to give these a press to activate them. And then you can slide up and down. It does give you that little bit of haptic feedback when they're in use. You have a wireless charge in here as well, so you can slot your mobile phone in. It's only one, although there is space for two. It only has the one wireless charger in here. and you've got a couple of cup holders here as well. They're decent size, and I'll just show you as well, in case you're wondering, you do get a Ford key, but it is the Volkswagen style of key. But anyway, that doesn't matter because you've got keyless entry and all that kind of stuff. It's available. Under the armrest, you have a lot of storage. So you've got this little tray here on top, but you can take that out, and you then have this really deep storage area in here. There's also a couple of different grooves, so you can take out these little slots and divide up different areas depending on how you want it. And you can also take this cup holder section out, and you'll see it has a little instructions here. So what you can do is you can take this out, and this little spot in here, it is designed to go in here, and it fits in, so it kind of slots in there out of the way. If you don't want to have it, it's not going to be rattling around or banging around, and it's suddenly you have this large open area here, so you can have all of your extra storage space in here. If you do want to have bulkier items, you can fit a laptop in here, for example. In fact, you could probably fit 2 or 3 laptops side by side in here if you wanted to as well. It's a pretty useful thing. Ford has obviously thought about this. We've seen Ford do clever things with their storage things before, like the boot in the Puma, for example. So yeah, pretty useful thing that they've done this, quite like it. Overall, the quality of the materials is actually pretty nice, you know, like there's no really sort of not nice materials. There's nice sort of, got this kind of slight carbon fiber effect here. And the overall quality is quite good, and you've also got this B&O sound bar as well, so you've got this, has a little bit of ambient lighting built in, and it just adds a little bit more detail to the top of the dashboard. So yeah, it's that's what the interior is like up front. Let's check out the back seats. In the back, there's quite a good amount of space. Now, I'm of fairly average height. I'm about 5'9". I don't have particularly long legs, but I can sit in here quite comfortably on the outer seats. For example, I have this driving position set up for my normal driving position, so I'm sitting behind myself effectively, and I've got a really generous amount of knee room here, so well done Ford on that. I also have pretty adequate amounts of headroom too, and this window line is actually relatively low down, so even smaller children in the back should still have a fairly good field of visibility outside, which is always great for reducing any risk of travel sickness. There is pretty much a flat floor all the way across, which is nice, and I like that this center console doesn't come back very far, so even whoever is sitting in the middle seat, they're not going to lose out too much in terms of leg room. You've got a couple of vents there, you've got 2 more USB-C ports back there. The middle seat is relatively wide. It's not quite as comfortable as what you're going to get in the outer 2 seats, but if you're not going to use that, you can obviously pop down the center armrest that has a couple of cup holders in it, and both of the outer seats also have very easily accessible ISOFIX mounting points too. There's decent sized door bins here and an okay armrest as well. So those sitting in the back of the Explorer aren't going to feel very hard done by at all. This is quite a roomy, quite a spacious section in the rear. Of the 2 Ford Explorer powertrain options that are available from launch, this single motor rear drive version is, I think, the pick of the 2. It gets a 77 kilowatt hour battery, which has a driving range in WLTP of up to 602 kilometers in a combined cycle. That obviously may be a little bit tricky to achieve, but Ford has done everything to try and get over that 600 kilometer barrier with this car. Still, it is going to be, for most people, enough when it comes to driving range. In terms of urban driving today, we've been going around towns and cities, things like that, and some rural roads, and at the slower speed stuff, it's been averaging about 18.7 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. Now, of course, that always varies depending on each specific use case. In that instance, this is what we've done today, and that's pretty regular driving, not trying to be especially quick or do anything to try and save the battery. That's just very average normal driving. When it comes to driving itself, well, there's still plenty of performance from that single rear drive motor. 200 186 horsepower and 545 newton meters of torque. So this thing is quick off the mark, more than quick enough for a car like this. 0 to 100 is just over 6 seconds, and it has a top speed of 180 kilometers per hour, which is only really relevant if you live in Germany. It'll happily cruise on a motorway, and it does so fairly quietly too. Now, we're in Slovenia, and the roads here are typically very, very good. They're to a good high standard. So that means we haven't really experienced a whole lot in terms of road noise, tire noise, things like that. This does feel like quite a refined car, and the chassis setup in particular, the suspension, does also feel quite well sorted. Now, Ford, of course, is very good when it comes to setting up suspension. It's got a whole heap of experience over the years, and it is true in this as well. It does ride the bumps quite nicely, in particular the damping. So it's not just the initial bump, it's what it does after that initial bump and how it absorbs that and soaks it, so you're not getting bounced around in this car. It does feel very planted, very secure, even just as a rear-wheel drive car. The steering as well has a nice feel to it. The moment you start to move off the center, it's already making that turn, so there's no lag, there's a nice sense of feedback to it. It also doesn't feel overly light. Often some electric cars can have very light steering, and that results in a real sense of kind of disconnection between what you're holding in your hands and what the front wheel is doing. With this, you do get a sense that there is that nice connection there to it. The driving position as well, I mentioned about this when I was showing you the interior earlier. You've got a nice view out of this car, and that sounds maybe a little bit cliched, but the A-pillar isn't particularly thick, and as often the case with a lot of cars these days, I can see the leading edge of the bonnet, I can see where the car ends, and I can see the tops of the wings as well. They kind of curve up a little bit. So, you know, it's very easy to position this car. You're not just seeing the bottom of a windscreen and nothing else. Also, rearward visibility, it's not bad. The window isn't huge, it's not an especially tall window, but you can see it pretty well, and when it comes to parking, the reversing cameras are actually pretty decent. Now, the big thing is, which one would you choose? For me, I think this single motor version is the one to go for, not just because it has a slightly longer driving range, but because there's still plenty of performance in this car. Okay, the all-wheel drive motor does have some merit in terms of if you're doing some towing, or for example if the weather is particularly bad or you're in more challenging conditions, but there's nothing a good set of winter tires won't help get you out of as well. There are some things I do miss though. Not having the paddles to adjust the regen, I feel, is a bit of a missed opportunity. They should really just offer this to people, especially if you are going to be driving in a lot of different scenarios. Okay, you can toggle that across into the B mode, and that does increase the regen, but it's a kind of one or the other. You only get this binary option, whereas it would be much nicer to have that option, especially if you are in maybe a more urban setting or in a city, that you can really dial that up and really exploit that one pedal driving feel. So I'm a little bit disappointed that Ford didn't do that. But one thing it does have, which is a bit of a carryover from what we've seen in some of the Volkswagen Group products, is that it does react quite well. If you're driving along and you lift off and you're coasting up to a slower moving vehicle in front, it does automatically increase the regen, so it automatically starts to slow the car. Now, it won't bring it to a complete stop. That's not a cruise control function, that's a separate thing, but as you're slowing down, it will at least try and maximize the amount of energy going back into the battery. Still, it would be nice to have some paddles to do it yourself as well. Interestingly, although there's not a huge difference in overall capacity between the two batteries, so this is the 77 kilowatt hour battery and the all-wheel drive has a 79 kilowatt hour battery, the charging speeds do differ. This will do 135 kilowatt peak DC, while the larger, higher capacity battery will do 185 kilowatt DC. Now, The overall charge times don't really vary a whole lot. It's more to do with just the overall chemistry and composition of the batteries, but still, it's something that some people might want to know about. Now, through corners and bends, it does handle quite nicely. It's that sure-footed feeling that I talked about is there. You do get a little bit of lean, so as you go around a corner, it does start to just load up a little bit, but it does still stay fairly flat. It's actually quite a natural feel that they put into it. So that little bit of lean is there, just lets you know what's happening with the car. It's not artificially trying to stay flat or anything like that. And also, the interesting thing is there are sometimes you'll put it into a bend and it will start to just regen a little bit more as you're going in, so as you lift off. But the handling, well, yeah, it's nice. It's a Ford. It kind of handles with that sort of predictability that you get from Fords. Yeah, there's a nice sort of fairly sweet feel from the steering. There's no vagueness. Even if you do need to make a little bit of a quick correction in a corner, it's very easy to do. It never gets fussed, and that's the thing with this car. It feels very settled as you're driving it, and that's something that will give drivers a lot of confidence. Is what they like. You know, it means that you know what the thing is doing at all times. But there is still some room for improvement with the Explorer. I would like if that brake pedal had a little bit more bite. Yes, it will slow the car up, but well, it kind of amplifies that sense of weight that this car has. It isn't the lightest car in the world, but when you do stand on the brakes, there's just that initial movement through the pedal at the top. It's just not quite the same sort of bite that I would like. That it's the sort of thing that might give people a little bit more confidence. It's more gradual in how it builds up pressure, and yes, you can do quite a hard stop, but I think it could just be a little bit better. The thing is, as good as the Ford Explorer is, there's a lot of other cars that are also just as good, and in often many ways a little bit better. It does enough, but it doesn't do anything to really set a new standard. And perhaps what doesn't help is the fact that this car was just so delayed in the first place. We should have been driving this car a year ago. And these days in the world of electric vehicles, things move pretty fast, and you can't afford to just give away a whole year of development and sales and all that kind of stuff. It feels like Ford has done enough for it to sit with the rest of the competition, but it hasn't tried to beat a lot of the competition. So that's our first drive review of the new Ford Explorer in this single motor rear drive setup. If you want to know more about the car, do visit our website. It's CompleteCar.ie. You'll find it linked in the description below, and it's a great resource for finding your next new car, as well as keeping up with all the latest car news. We'd also love to know what you think about the Explorer, so please do get involved in the comments below. Tell us what you think. Thanks for watching.